So can we start or will wait?
Okay, so it's time we can start. Okay, so good morning everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The session is currently on live stream on YouTube. So just in case you get logged out and you have to log in again due to the full capacity, you'd find a YouTube link popped up to enable you join the live stream session. We've also sent the live stream link on the platforms as well. So my name is Rafael Ajana, and I'm privileged to be the host for this workshop, this series, this workshop series, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all. First of all, I would want to say a big thank you to God Almighty for this event and the impact it's going to bring to us all. And I'd like to also give a big thank you to our speakers. First to Professor Minakitan. He came up with a good idea that we can do this to impact students and also researchers' expertise. And today it's back to life. Thank you so much, Prof. And also to all of our speakers for which you get to know them over the course of the event series. And thank you. And to our partners, student leaders, and to Tarragon Edge Limited, Dr. Genevieve Duncan Obobi, and ICS Africa, Miss Emmeline Dati, our chief mentors. Thank you. And finally, to the audience, to you all, you are such a great part of this whole workshop series, and thank you for making it. And we look forward to an impactful journey through to the end. Without wasting much time, I'm going to delve deep into our first session for today, um, which is going to welcome Professor Minaki Tambira. So give me just a minute whilst I read through his profile briefly, and then we start. But in the meantime, it's good as you are keeping it active. You can keep on sending some emojis to show that it's lively and that we have 300 people here on the call. And also for participants on Zoom or on YouTube, it's good to have you on actively. Currently, we have 238 participants joining on YouTube at the moment, still counting. So kindly keep it up. I see the comments on the YouTube chat. Keep it coming. We will give you the chance to ask your questions via YouTube and also on Zoom as well. So just keep the participation on going smooth. So let me just start right now with the introduction. So, welcome to the Research Methods Training and Certification Workshop. And I'm Raphael, your host. Our first speaker and the speaker of today's session today is Professor Minakitan Bihira. He is the chairperson and professor of economics at the Center for Informal Sector and Labor Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in India. Professor Minakitan is a leading scholar of development economics whose research spans livelihoods, migration, forest management, and vulnerable tribal groups. His extensive field work and publications appearing in the Indian Forester, the Indian Journal of Economics, and Journal of Social and Economic Development offer rigorous empirical insights. He has led multiple national research projects and strengthening methodologies in data collection, social economic analysis, and impact evaluation. House, it's my pleasure to welcome our first speaker and then also the sole speaker for today's session, Professor Menakitan Behira. Thank you so much, Prof, for making it.
Thank you. Thank you for these introductions. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So my intention here that I am taking this interest to speak on this contest, which is very, very essential that we all the researcher, whether we are doing our PhD degree or you are doing our post-graduation degree or we are doing any research individual study. So this is very, very important topic. So at least we all researchers should know. So with this background, remember one thing, the topic that we are planning today. So how to write a synopsis or research proposal for our PhD degree. So since last maybe 15 years, so we are trying to best that at least our young researcher, they needs to be very clear how to write a research proposal. So taking on that background, before you start your any research, remember one thing, in any field, particularly I am trying to give more emphasis on social science, any discipline that we are working. So whether you are writing your PhD thesis, whether you are writing a research paper, whether you are doing a evaluation study, or you are doing a funding, any study that you are doing. So in that context, remember one thing, we as a researcher, so always we need to ask the three questions to ourselves before we start our research work. And these three questions is why, what, and how. The same in research language. Remember one thing is the question why is known as problem, or otherwise we call as a statement of problem. And the second question is what is known as your objective of the study. And your the last question how, so that is the methodology of the study. So I will give each term in detail. So all the research that we are conducting, or your MPhil degree, or your PhD degree, or any, if you are writing a research paper for publications, remember one thing, all these things are covered in these three. That is the problem, then your objective, and then your methodology. Okay, so these are the three important questions before you start your research work. You need to ask yourself many times on this aspect, and the order remains same. First, why, second, what, third, how. Okay, so you need to keep in mind. Now, so the first, I hope the slide is changing. Yes or no?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, good. So remember one thing, it is, you just look at this slide. So it is not possible to cover or read line by line, but I will try to give my own experience as a researcher, as a supervisor. So where we are missing on this point. Remember one thing, when you are writing is research proposal that we call as a, otherwise called as a synopsis for our academic degree, maybe MA degree, maybe MPhil degree, maybe PhD degree. So for this, so the important criteria is that we need to write a synopsis
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Just a minute. whilst Prof get his internet connection fixed. Um, a slight internet glitch. Thank you. But in the meantime, whilst we do wait for him to get back, you can just ensure you have your notes available, your what you need for questions available whilst you prepare. And it's good to still keep up the networking on the chat room as well. The YouTube live stream session is currently on and it's ongoing. So please kindly note that we would pay equal attention to everyone on YouTube and then everybody on the Zoom chat room. We would respond to the questions on both platforms, and we would also share an assessment form at the end of each session to collate the data of all participants that partook in the sessions. So that's going to make it fair enough for both, just like that's for participants joining across both platforms. Thank you. Thank you. So kindly hold on a bit whilst Prof joins. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So it's a slight technical glitch. Um, so just kindly hold on briefly. Just a minute. Okay, so while we do wait, let's do a brief exercise while we wait for him to join. I'm sorry, no, it could happen like that sometimes. So I can still see on YouTube active comments taking place at the moment. Please, when you do get the chance to visit our YouTube channel, it's a newly created YouTube channel. You may want to subscribe for more updates, and then also yes to support what we're doing. And then I'll just like us to start with a little bit of engaging activity whilst Prof gets to join. So this said, what are some of your expectations from today's event as we look into how to craft a very standout proposal, research proposal? You can send your responses in the chat room. I'd like to read some of them out. And so let's see some of your expectations. Yeah, and also for members on YouTube as well, you can do the same thing on both platforms at the moment, viewing both ends. And the team is also having a look at both ends. Okay, so just a minute. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Please, we would need one person to, if you can, kindly switch to to YouTube so that Prof could join. He's currently in the waiting room. The capacity is reached, so he's not able to join. So if anybody could do us the favor to switch to YouTube so Prof can join the session and share his screen, that would be so lovely. Thank you. We really appreciate you. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, okay. Yes, thank you. He's joined. Thank you. So that's fine. Thank you so much, guys. So we're good to go.
I think okay. I'm very sorry. Yeah? Uh, so okay. So you just look at this slide because I never there is a power cut, but I don't not yet. The slide is visible.
Yes, it is. It's visible.
Hello.
Yes, yes, it's
Hello.
visible.
Yeah. So
But
remember, yeah.
it's not yet
So I'm
presented.
making sports. Yes, I'm making. Yes. Okay. So remember one thing. Whenever you are writing a degree or PhD degree or seminar paper, the first important point you needs to keep in mind that it should be written in future tense. Keep in mind. And the second point that it needs to be 3,000 to 4,000 words. Okay, so vary from different university to university. I will share this outline. You just look at it. So
Okay, Prof. I think you are currently muted. I don't know if you're speaking. Um,
yeah,
okay.
now
Okay.
am I this slide is visible?
Yes, it's visible. It's
Okay,
visible.
good. Okay, good. Okay. So if you go for, so just look at it. Most if you go for on this contest that you are talking about, so most generally if you go for this is you just look at it. The if you go for most of the university that we are working, you will find the structure of this synopsis as follows. Okay, you just look at this slide. So if I can make you this full screen also, you just look at it. So you can stop me if I'm not able to, if you have any questions, clarifications, you please ask me. And okay, so remember one thing, when you go for, so the outline of your synopsis is first you just look at, I will explain each term in details. So one is, if you go for, particularly you talk about, the first is your, that you needs to, that we call as a cover page. Okay, so if you go for that, we generally we write the cover page. So and then you write your particularly on the context of your the title, that and who is your supervisor, which university you are submitting. Okay, all these things I will explain detail. You just look at it. So maybe you will find in different university, so you will find maybe, but overall you find most of the research proposal, the format remains same. Maybe the order, some variations are there, but most of the cases in our university in India, so we follow this pattern. Okay, so maybe, so other points are there. So this is not that you needs to follow this pattern. Whatever the pattern that in your university, so please try to, if you go for on this contest, you just write down. Okay, I will explain each term with explanations on this point. Okay, so now remember one thing. So the you just imagine, so whenever you are writing a synopsis, so it should be very specific, clear. Okay, if you go for, just imagine, I'm just coming, if you go for, you just the title. Okay, whenever the first important point, whenever you are deciding to write a PhD thesis or synopsis, remember one thing, the title is very, very important. You just go to all this point is written. But remember one thing, I will share with all the students, all the researchers, those who are here, try to write a synopsis in very, very contemporary areas or new areas where very few study are there or very important. You as a researcher, you want to work on this. So my humble request to each one of you, those who are present here, so you needs to identify yourself that broadly, so you take a selected topic which is very contemporary, very relevant in your field or in your discipline. Okay, so this is the first important point you needs to keep in mind. So this is the first point. And the second point, all this point I have written here. So I hope you needs to be, whenever you are writing your synopsis, so try to give a title in a such a manner that will be, if you go for very simple language, very clear, very short. Okay, so you needs to be, so whenever you are writing all this point that is written, you needs to decide yourself. Okay, I hope you know. Suppose I am giving the example. I am working on labor economics. So in the labor economics, like everywhere, when I was in Ghana, so we are working on gig economy that we call as a platform economy. Are you getting the point? The social security measures, the land issue, the mining issue, the water crisis. So everything is very, very relevant. So whenever you are selecting a research topic, you just look at it before we proceed. Whenever you are writing, so you as a researcher, I hope this slide is visible. Please, I'm not able to see anyone. So
Yes, it's visible.
yeah, please, just look at it. So whenever you decided, when you are selecting any research topic that you are planning to work, I have given in the right side, you just look at it. So most of the cases, remember one thing, if you are doing a PhD student and you want to spend 4 years, 5 years on this, particularly on any topic that you are planning to work. So the important point you needs to keep in mind that you needs to select a topic which is contemporary, that is first. But the second point that I needs to, your interest, you just look at it. I always say, because you need to spend 4 years, 5 years, 6 years on this topic. So any topic you are selecting, so that should be very, very specific, and also your interest should be there. First point. And the second point that I will say, that interest of your supervisor. All the point right side, you talk about livelihood, you talk about poverty, you talk about inequality, you talk about employment, health, education, migration, gig workers, gender inequality, tribal issues that we call as the indigenous group. So most of the cases you find that is related to this contest. Okay, so I hope you understand this point. So if you have, and the last point that you needs to keep in mind, your interest, your supervisor interest, and also remember one thing, the availability of data. That is important. I have already explained the contemporary, the relevance, the topic that you want to what. All these points before you select a research topic for your PhD, for your MPhil degree, for your MA seminar paper, anything that you are writing, you needs to on this point. Okay, so this is the general idea. We as a researcher, we need to know about it before we selecting a research work. Now, so you know, so you just look at the structure. In the structure, so you just imagine that you needs to first important point that I always say, you as a researcher, when you are starting any research work, the first point that you needs to follow, that we call as a review of literature. Okay, this is the first important. Suppose you are planning to write a research paper, you are planning to write a PhD thesis, or you are planning to write a your that we call as a your synopsis or anything. So the first I always say to this young researcher, please be at least go to the review of literature. I hope you all know. Now I will explain, because remember one thing, the past questions that we ask, why I am interested to do research on this, what is new on this research that I want to contribute on this literature. So that is possible through the review of literature. And from review of literature, you will identify your research gap. From research gap, you will identify your research questions, your research objective, your research hypothesis. I will explain detail. Okay, so the first point, what do you mean by review of literature? By review of literature means the topic that I am planning to work, what are the different people or authors work in that area. Suppose take the example, I am working on child labor, I am working on labor issue, I am working on gender issue. So suppose any topic that I am working, suppose I am working on culture. So before me, who are the authors they have written on that? What is their objective? What is their methodology? What is their findings? What is their implications of the research work? But remember one thing, my own experience, most of the researcher, so you write abstract of the research articles as a review of literature. Please, my humble request to all of you, I will share all this point. I'm coming to this review of literature. If you just look at it, if you go for uh, just review of literature, if you go for, I hope it is, you just read it, yeah? It quickly on this particularly contest. So remember one thing. So if you go for, so review of literature, so you needs to be very, very critical. What is available in this literature and what is not. If you go for only we do review of literature to identify our research gap. You just, this is very, very important. We as a researcher, the first important point we needs to keep in mind that we needs to identify from the review of literature the research gap. Okay, so this is the first important point. So you needs to be very clear the meaning of your research gap. Many researchers, so all my dear friends, so you needs to keep in mind that whatever topic that I am planning to work, so what is new, what is not known, what is not, particularly if you go for that, you want to all this, you just read the slide line by line. I hope nothing you can easily understand. So that means when you are doing review of literature, how you will do review of literature? So you do, in your to do review of literature, you know many online sources are available. Many PhD theses is available in the university. Like if you go for in India, we have all the thesis that is produced in different university. So we have called as a Sodh Ganga. All theses are available. So all the research article, books, report, online sources now in one click. So you know you will identify all these things that you are talking about. So when, if you as a researcher, my humble request to all of you that you need to ask yourself that how my study is going to be different from the existing study. That is the important. That is your contributions. So you read this slide. So I am not going. That means what is existing, what is known, but what is not known, that is your research gap. What is missing, that is your research gap. What is not answered, that is your research gap. The what is not solved whenever you do review of literature, just read one line, the last second line. If you go for this, most of the cases, you as a researcher, research gap is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. That is important. That is your research gap. So this point, always, whenever you are doing a research, you need to be very, very clear that how my study is going to be different from the existing studies. Okay, so this is, you will ask me questions, so I will try to answer anything if you have any issue on this point. Now, so research, when you go for research gap, when you are adding some new contribution to your research work, so maybe in terms of, so you find the different new variables, new indicator, new concept that is not debated, not discussed. So if you go for, so most of the cases, so you find that in terms of methodological gap, maybe some problem with the methodology that you are talking about, maybe some new variables that is not taken into account. I'm just giving one example. In the indigenous group in India, so you find, suppose the literacy is on an, if you go for the female literacy is 30%. I'm working on one tribe. Suppose you imagine this Mankaria tribe that we call as the indigenous group in India. So maybe I find that literature says that poverty is the cause of low literacy, or school is not available in that area. But you as a researcher, when you go to literature, you find that the culture dimension is not taken into account with respect to low literacy of indigenous group, or the course outline is not linked to this indigenous group, their nature, their culture. So you as a researcher, you want to how the culture play a significant role with respect to low literacy among indigenous group in India. Okay, so all the point that I have given in terms of gaps, so maybe in terms of method problems, maybe in terms of the variables that you are taking into account, maybe in terms of theoretical knowledge, maybe all this. So remember, this is the first starting point. You as a researcher, you need to be clear. So whenever you are writing a synopsis, so you need to ask yourself that how my study will be different from the existing study. So you need to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the variables or the indicators or anything that is not maybe discussed or not known in the literature on this contest. So you understand. So if you go for this point, you will imagine this slide is changing. Yes or no? Yes, good. Okay, please, you just, yes, yeah, good. So if you understand your research gap, remember one thing. So from research gap, you will identify or you will write your technically term that we call as a statement of problem. You will write your research questions. You will write your objective. You will write your hypothesis. Clearly, so remember one thing. I will explain both. Just give me some time. So you understand that there are different types of approach: qualitative research and quantitative research, quantitative approach. So broadly, I hope many students in sociology, in anthropology, in political science. So I will come to this point and just give me a general idea on this concept. So if you go for now, you identify from the literature that, okay, this is the research gap. So when you go for, you identify research gap. So now after this research gap, so 4 subheading is very, very important, that we call as a statement of problem, that we call as a research questions, that we call as a objective, that we call as a hypothesis. Okay, now you just, I have all point are expand. If you go for, you just imagine. So I am coming to this point. So whenever you are writing a this first, when you identify your research gap, maybe you find that maybe methodological some gaps are there, theoretical some gaps are there, variables some gaps are there. So on this many gap you find, but you as a researcher, you don't have a time to go for all this gap that you have identified during your PhD work or MPhil work. So there is concept that we called the problem or the statement of problem. What do you mean by this word statement of problem? The layman language. So meaning of this statement of problem, when you identify your research gap, so within the research gap, which one dimensions that your research wants to focus on that? Basically, I say one important component or one of the different problem or gap that you have identified. So what is the important gap that you want in your studies? So that gap, 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. So you need to summarize in 1 paragraph or 2 paragraph. That we call as a statement of problem, taking all these following questions. Okay, so you need to be very clear that culture, suppose I have taken, I am working on indigenous group, I have taken culture as one indicator or one variable that is not studied in the past with respect to the education. So in my study, I have taken one variable, one indicator, culture, so with respective. So I will write 1 paragraph with respective to culture, the gap that is not studied by any researcher so far. Okay, so you needs to, that is the understanding of your, that we call as a statement of problem. Okay, that means you as a researcher write one paragraph with respective to your research gap, taking all these questions that I have written on this particularly contest. Okay, so that is the meaning of your, that we called as a statement of problem. So remember one thing, how you will find now statement of problem, we will write from research gap. This is the first point. Now you go to the second point. This is very, very important. Please, so all my dear friends, please read this slide quickly. So if you go for now, the important when you write your idea, you go review of literature, then you identify your research gap, then after you identify your research gap, you write statement of problem or the problem. So I hope if you have any questions, I will try to answer that question. Now, so the second point, after your statement of problem, you need to write your research questions. Okay, so whenever you are writing a research questions, remember one thing, you need to be very clear, what do you mean by research questions? You read all these points that I have written there. So remember one thing, so whenever you are writing a research questions, okay, so you just imagine research questions is always written in question form. Always remember one thing, when you identify your research gap, so when you formulate a research questions, so always you start with research questions. So research questions is always the gap that you want to particularly to explore. So it's written in question form. You just look at it. I have written there example. Always research question is written what, how, where, when. All these are, if you go for always, so from this research gap, you will write your research questions. You just, I am given the example. Suppose I am working on indigenous group in Ghana. So particularly, so on that contest, how do dropout rate among indigenous and non-indigenous students differ in your higher education institutions? Okay, so all this particularly you talk about this, what is the impact of your microfinance on the income level of rural women entrepreneurship in Ghana? So you as a researcher, so you needs to keep in mind always research questions is written in the question form. Okay, so that you needs to keep in mind. I will explain, I will share what is the difference between research question and research objective. So you just imagine. So this is the, that we called as a objective of the study. I always say, all my dear friends, whenever you are writing your synopsis, so this is most important, that you needs to ask yourself that what you want to find out from the research. Okay, so if you go for your objective, You read all this point. I'm coming to this point. Always written, if you go for read this slide, always your research objective is written using action verb. That means to find out, to calculate, to describe, to suggest, to determine, to compare, to measure. Always, I hope you all, my dear students or young researcher, you know these things. Okay, so you needs to keep in mind, so you understand your research questions is always written in the question form and your objective is written in the action verb. Most of the researcher, I hope you all know all these things. Now, you just read. So many things we need to speak on this issue. So you just one another point. Whenever you are writing a objective, so the first important point you needs to keep in mind, the objective should be SMART. You just look at the meaning of the SMART, SMART. So that means whenever you are writing your objective, so this objective should fulfill all these criteria that we have written in this slide. Should be very specific, and at least you can measure it. Data is available in this secondary data is available, or from the field you can collect the data from the field. Okay, and also with the time limit that within maybe your PhD is maybe 4 years, 5 years on this contest. So you needs to be very, very clear on this contest whenever you are talking about this objective and research questions. Now, remember one thing, one point you needs to be very, very clear, that your objective and your research questions that you are writing, it should always from the research gap. That you have to keep in mind. That always important point. Many times I realize that young researcher, so the research gap is different and the objective or research question is different. So you as a researcher, so you needs to keep in mind whenever you are writing a research questions or objective, that should be from your research gap. So if you go for, so most of the cases, so if you go for always, so most of these university, if you go for, so many depends upon many professors or many university, they start with the research questions, they don't write objective, but many professors, they write objective, they don't write research questions. I always say that we as a researcher, you needs to write research questions and a objective. Now, you just imagine this slide. This slide is changing, yes or no? Okay, I hope yes, good. So if you go, yes, good. So now you just read, you as a researcher, I say, with example, always, so you identify from the gap. From the gap, you identify your research questions, which is always written in the question form. And other side, your research objective is written in your action verb. I have already explained on that. To find out, to investigate, to analyze, to identify, to examine, all these points. Now, another point you need to keep in mind, always your research questions is very, if you go for from one research questions, you can formulate two research objective. One research questions, you can formulate two research objective. That means suppose you take, imagine I am working on livelihood issue of indigenous people in Ghana. Okay, so if I suppose my research question is what are the different source of livelihood of indigenous people in Ghana? This is my research questions. If I write objective, so I will write to find out sources, different sources of livelihood of indigenous people in Ghana. Now, so I say one research questions can be written two objective. So the example that I say now, I written that what are the source of livelihood. So this is one research questions. So I will make that two research questions, like to find out source of income from mining, to find out source of income from agriculture, to find out source of income from your government services or business. Okay, so that means you just read this slide that generally your research questions is very in general nature, and your research objective is very specific with respective that you want to find out for your study. Okay, so that means your research questions will provide you directions that how you are going to study. And your research objective is going to provide the specific dimension that you want to measure. Okay, so this is something you need to understand whenever you are writing your research and other things. Then I will come to it. I hope this slide is changing. And this is important dimensions you need to understand. Okay, this is also important that what do you mean by hypothesis? Generally, remember one thing, those who are doing qualitative research, I am a sociologist, I am an anthropologist, I am a political scientist, so it is not essential that you need to write a hypothesis. But if you are a quantitative researcher, you are working on quantitative dimensions. Okay, so in terms of number, in terms of magnitude, so suppose you are a student of economics, you are a student of psychology. So on that context, you as a researcher, I always encourage you needs to write a hypothesis. But remember one thing, hypothesis, it is not mandatory that you needs to write. If your supervisor or your advisory committee that we call as, so then only you needs to write a hypothesis. Okay, this is the point. Now, what do you mean by hypothesis? So generally, it is the researcher is thinking or it is assuming that maybe before you start your research work, you are thinking on that. Suppose I am giving one example. So I thought that those, if you go for, so lesser the land holding in Ghana depend more on mining. Okay, this is my assumption. I thought that, so if you go for two assumptions, if you go for, so before you start your research work, you are thinking on these dimensions. Okay, so that means I have given the example. Suppose I'm giving another example. Suppose I say the indigenous people. So the lesser the land holding of the indigenous people in Ghana depend more on income from the forestry. Okay, so this is my assumption. That may be true, that may not be true. So we only plan before you start your research work. And that will be accepted and rejected only when you go for data collection, collect the data, analyze the data, interpret the data, and then you conclusion that whatever hypothesis that I have taken, so I accept or reject. Now, 2 points I will share with you. All my dear researcher, please keep in mind that many students write hypothesis, but when they are doing their analysis, they are not writing anything about the hypothesis. The first mistake most of the young researchers they are doing. So my humble request to all researchers here, please, whenever you are writing a hypothesis in your synopsis or PhD thesis or your paper, you need to write in this discussion chapter, okay, the hypothesis that I have taken into account. So from the data, so on the basis of the statistical analysis, so I accept or reject this hypothesis. That is very, very important. Otherwise, please don't write hypothesis of this study. Okay, now, so you just understand, I try to, whenever you are writing your synopsis, you try to understand. Oh, this slide is visible or not? Yes or no? Yes, good. Okay, so if you go for, so I have just finished, just you imagine. So you as a researcher, where you start off whenever you are writing your synopsis. So we start with review of literature. You identify your research gap, and from the research gap, you write your statement of the problem. You write your research questions. You write your hypothesis. Okay, now remember one thing. So within these first two questions that I have told, why and what, so far we have covered only these two questions. Why I am interested to work on this topic, what is new on this topic, what is I am going to contribute to the literature on this topic. Okay, now, so whenever you are writing your synopsis, so when you finish all this part, then you remember one thing. So try to write your, that we call as a introduction. And many people are writing first, generally we talk about introductions, we call as a background of the study, we call the significance of the study. So you as a researcher, remember one thing. So if you go for, just imagine, now whenever you are writing your introductions, you as a researcher, so mostly what you need to write. So please just clear all this the signs that please you are making. So you just introduce many. If you go for, I have written somewhere, you just write down, just the slide is changing, you just look at it. That means when you write your introductions, you need to provide, okay, most of the cases. So whenever you are writing, so you try to provide a background. Suppose I am working on gig workers, I am working on indigenous group, I am working on gender. Okay, so maybe you as a researcher, so whenever you just introduce this general some information, some background of your study, maybe with at least 4-5 citations, established authors. So citations, so you just look at it. So that means in the introduction part, so your duty is that you need to provide some statistics, some information, some development, some all this point you as a researcher, you need to provide. One thing I will say that you as a researcher, so maybe if you are writing your synopsis, so in this first point that we call as a introduction, that we call as a background, so you try to write down this particularly in this context of your research area, the importance of this research area. You need to provide this current knowledge and development with respect to your research area. You to provide the important broader issues with respect to your research area. You need to provide current debate or challenges in this introduction and background. And also why this study is important to study, you need to provide. Okay, then you need to, you as a researcher, so remember one thing. So in the last part of it, that you need to provide, that we call as a, many people in the contemporary times, they are writing the conceptual and theoretical framework in the introduction itself. Like you just look at it, I have written somewhere in this part, if you go for, if the slide is changing, just look at it. Is it visible or not? Yes. Okay, good, all good, excellent. So remember one thing, most important dimension, please read quickly on these dimensions. Most of young researcher, we are missing on this aspect. Suppose if you are doing quantitative study or qualitative study, if I always encourage you, whenever you are writing your synopsis, you make a subheading as a theoretical framework. Okay, you need to understand, but many peoples also in the contemporary times, they try to say that please you can, in the introduction part, besides your conceptual understanding, so you need to introduce the theoretical framework, the conceptual framework in the introduction or background itself. That is your choice. That is with your discussion with your supervisor. So you try to understand whether you will write a subheading that we call as a theoretical framework. But I always suggest that you need to make a subheading in your synopsis that we call as a theoretical framework. Okay, I hope many people in Ghana, they are doing the same thing. Okay, so like in our case that we always encourage you write a subheading. If you are not writing same theoretical framework, you need to write in your introduction part, because in the synopsis, you need to write 15 to 20 pages. Your introduction should be at least 2 pages or 1.5 pages, at least with 10 citation, 10 to 15 citations, establish authors, those who are working in your area. Okay, that is the important point. Now, if you go for theoretical framework, what is the layman understanding of this theoretical framework? That means the understanding of this theoretical framework, what is the existing theory in the literature that will help your research work or provide a clear understanding to proceed your research work. Okay, otherwise, this theoretic, what is already in the literature, that is already developed by already in this existing theories. You talk about many, as you know, particularly on this, if you go for, you talk about your human development theory, you talk about your sustainable livelihood theory, you talk about your capability approach theory, you talk about your human development approach theory, you talk about your social exclusion theory. All this point is very, very important to provide a clarity, understanding how and why certain types of relations is exist with respective to your study. Okay, so in that context, so you as a researcher, you needs to be very, very clear whenever you are writing a theory. Okay, so I have given this example that if you go for the theory is that if you in the context of your human capital theory, so broadly gives the idea that if you investment in skill, education, training, so that will ultimately leads to this individual productivity, and also it includes increase in wage level, employability, and your career growth. So you as a researcher, in your suppose you are working on skill development, skilled work, like most of the contemporary times in the social science, that it is very, very important dimension. You talk about AI, you know how AI is going to change our future of work. So you as a researcher, if you are working on this, how AI is going to impact on this labor market, so you need to use this theory or this theoretical framework for your research work. So you need to be very, very clear. When you say conceptual, means what are the different concepts, what are the different variables, what are the different independent variable, what is the different dependent variable. You as a researcher are going to study on this context. Okay, so you needs to be very, when you are writing, suppose when you go for conceptual understanding related to your research work. So maybe you just imagine, suppose all this, you as a researcher, you are developed or you are using for your research work, the conceptual framework. So you just example I have given, you just look at dependent variable, independent variable, your moderating variable. You just look at it. How your independent variable, independent variable means that is, if you go for that affect, dependent variable means which is affected by the independent variable. You just imagine. So your academic growth is, if you go for affected by your teaching quality, your internet access, your knowledge about AI, your hard working. So all these independent variable will impact on your academic performance. So this is, you as a young researcher, you needs to keep in mind that whenever you are doing this, so on this contest, you need to be very clear on this. So you need to write a subheading, or you, if your supervisor is telling, no, you need to write in this introduction itself, that you write. Okay, so that point I have already explained on this contest, that if you go for, so now the first part is over. If you go for with respective to on this contest of the 2 questions in your synopsis. I hope if you have any questions, you can ask me now. Now I will continue. Tell me. I will go to
Okay,
this. Huh?
okay. Okay, so we would be open to take any questions from the audience. You can raise up your hand using the feature on Zoom, and then we would call you to unmute and speak. Or alternatively, you can send your question to the chat room, and then I'll read it out
Yeah,
to Prof.
yeah.
So we have one person, Comfort Dan Chavandu. So this is what we do. You'd so when you're allowed to unmute and speak, you mention your full name. No, sorry, just your first name, and then where you're connecting from,
Is
and
it
then
is it possible? Do
your
one thing.
question.
Let me finish. Do one thing. Let me finish first this methodology. Then
Okay,
maybe we'll go for discussion. I think it is better.
okay.
Huh?
And yes, Prof. And for those on YouTube, I sent a WhatsApp number on the channel on YouTube. You can send your questions directly there so that I have it and ask Prof from there.
Yeah. Yes. Because, so do you have time limit for this Zoom platform? Maybe
Uh,
after 2 hours. Uh, is it fixed for
yes,
time hour?
yes. So we have about 40 minutes to end.
Okay. Then if suppose we extend more time, it will stop.
It won't stop, but it will go beyond the limits for today.
Okay. Good. So that is the
Okay.
question. Okay. Oh, then maybe let me finish fast. Okay. Now, this is if you go for, this is whenever you are writing your synopsis. So all my dear friends, so you need to be very careful. I have already given, I hope you all know. Always we are, most of the researcher is missing in research gap and missing in methodology. So all my dear friends, you needs to, whenever you are writing a synopsis, you needs to be very clear that how to write a methodology. Okay, so with respect to, remember one thing, this is the point that we generally use in our university, in my center, but don't think that the same pattern, but most of the university, most of the researcher, generally we use this pattern. Okay, so you as a researcher, the first important point whenever you are writing your research proposal, you need to write what is the nature of the study. Is it descriptive research? Is it analytical research? Is it explorative research? Is it experimental research? Or if you go for, you as a researcher, so you need to be very, very clear. Suppose I am a sociologist, I am an anthropologist. So if you go for, generally, if you go for, we use explorative research. So basically, limited information in our hand. With this little information in our hand, so we are exploring more and more. Like suppose I am working on indigenous people in Ghana, so I don't have a understanding of the culture. So little information in the literature about culture. Taking that information, I go to the field and explore more and more dimension with respect to culture of indigenous people in Ghana. So you as researcher, so you need to be very clear what is the nature of the study and what approach you are using. Are you using quantitative approach? Most of the economic students, generally we use quantitative approach. Okay, that we call as a quantitative. If you go for the research design, quantitative research design, qualitative research design, and if you combine together in the contemporary times, that we call as a mixed method research design. That means both quantitative and qualitative. So you as a researcher, it is very, very important. So you need to identify what is the nature. Most of the proposal, please write at least one paragraph of each the point that I have written. Your methodology should be very clearly written. Now, the second point, you just look at it. Suppose I'm talking about those who are working on primary data. They are going to the field. I know that many people in Ghana, they are working with respect to the primary survey for their research. Really, I very happy on that. My own experience in the University of Cape Coast. So that means where is your respondent located? That we call as a study area. Why you have selected the study area? We don't have an answer to that. So you need to, suppose I am selecting one indigenous group in India. Why? Why I am selecting on that? So you as a researcher, you need to write one paragraph of your study area. Where is the study located? What is their population? What is their male population? What is their female population? What is their socioeconomic condition? So you need to write down one paragraph of the study area. And also you need to justify why I have selected this particularly the study area. What is the justification of that? That you needs to justify. Most of the researcher, we miss on this point. Okay, I hope you all agree with me. So you will, whenever you will ask, so I will try my best to answer these questions. So the second point, this is very, very important, not for qualitative researcher, for quantitative researcher. That we call as a sampling. That means most of the researcher, they don't have an idea that what type of sampling technique that he used. You just look at it. I have all this point. Maybe in future, I will take class on sampling. This is a separate lecture on that. So I will do definitely for if you are interested in future, I will do that. But you just imagine, this is very, very important. Every researcher should ask himself or herself that what type of sampling I am using. Is it probability sampling? Is it non-probability sampling? That needs no clarity on that. This is the first important point. Maybe in future when I will explain each types with example. But you as a researcher, whenever you are writing your synopsis, you need to write the study will be based on probability sampling using stratified random sampling, always future tense. So this is important dimension. You need to justify why you have used stratified random sampling. So the study uses stratified random sampling because the population is heterogeneous. To make best representative from each group, so I have used stratified random sampling for my analysis. This is the first point. All maybe we'll explain detail. And then important, everyone asks, what should be my sample size? B300, B400, B500 for quantitative and qualitative. So you as a researcher, how you select the sample size? So you need to justify to your professors, and you need to write in your synopsis that on this basis, on this indicator, I have selected this sample. So that is the important dimensions. You as a researcher, whenever you are writing the second point that we call as a sampling and sample size. So please, my humble request to all young researchers, whether you are working in qualitative research or quantitative research, you needs to be very, very clear on this sampling and sample size with justifications. Why you are using this sampling technique and why you select the sample size, what are the indicator, are you using any formula? So to select the sample, so that justification should be there. And from each category, you need to provide. That is the second important dimension in terms of your methodology. Most of young researchers, we miss this part. Now, the third point, if you go for, just look at it. So I have already, that we called as I have already explained the fourth point. So how I am going to collect the informations from this study that I am planning? Basically, that we called as, if you go for your sources of data. So you as a researcher, if you are using, so you will write, what you will write? Now you just look at it. I have written somewhere. The sources of data. You just read this. That means the present study will be based on both primary and secondary data. The secondary data will be collected from whatever source. Suppose I am talking about here in Indian context, suppose I am working on indigenous group. So the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, the census data, the periodic labor force data. So all the secondary data with respective to your research study, so you need to write in future tense. Similarly, exactly in terms of your primary data, the primary data will be collected from the respondent through structured interview, focus group discussions, your observations method, all like this. So you needs to, and also the perception analysis of different stakeholder is taken into account. All these things as the primary data you always write. So I write there. So you as a researcher, you needs to be very, very clear whether you are writing your synopsis or you are writing your PhD report. Those who are writing PhD report, you need to write a separate chapter as a methodology. So in this methodology, you need to write that what are the tools of your data collection, what are the, whether you have done pilot testing of the instrument that you have developed, okay, how you are collecting the data, what method you have used to collect the data, and how you are. This is something that you need to add more on this dimension whenever you are writing. This part is very, very important. We as researcher, we need to follow. Now, then you write, so here that we call as a data analysis. So all the data that will be collected through this qualitative data, quantitative data will be entered into SPSS, Stata, eViews, all are quantitative software for data analysis. Similarly, that we call as a qualitative data is generally, so far my understanding is that we call as a atlas.ti and NVivo. These two software, most of these qualitative researcher, they use for their research work. Okay, so you will write that exactly I have written, just look at it. All this point, you just look at it. I hope this slide is visible. So you easily you can understand. So you in this future tense, how you are writing your data analysis component, so with respective to your particularly on this context. Okay, so that you needs to read line by line. That means always you needs to write whatever data that will analyze through software will be presented in the form of descriptive statistics, maybe mean, percentage, median, all this. And that data will be presented with respective to in the form of table, in the form of flowchart, in the pie diagram, like that. Okay, so that is this important point that if you go for on this aspect we are talking about on this concept. Now, so this last point that we called as a, so that is the important dimension when you are doing your primary survey. You as a researcher, you need to write on these ethical considerations. This is very, very important whenever you are doing the primary survey. Okay, all this point, whenever, this is the question, third question, how? If you are writing a research paper, if you are writing a PhD report, if you are writing your synopsis, if everything, believe me, my humble request to each one of you, please at least give more importance to this methodology part. You need to be very clear on this methodology part, and you need to give more emphasis all the point that is written. At least if you are writing your synopsis, maybe it should be 1 pages or 2 pages on taking all the point in your synopsis. And if you are writing your PhD thesis report, then it should be a chapter of 10 to 12 pages on all the point. So maybe I know in your university some pattern may be different, but overall you find the structure remains same. Okay, So this is something that you understand. I just explain this point whenever you just. So if you go for all these points, so far we covered your this last scope of the study. That means if you go for scope of the study, you just look at it. I have written all this point. So basically, so if you go for suppose anything that you are writing with respect to your scope of the study, you as a researcher, all this point. So that means, so you as a all this point whenever you are writing, so where is your population located? What is your geographical scope that you want to study? Okay, so so who will be included, who will not be included, why will not be included? So what is the nature of all this point that you as a researcher, whenever you are writing, so maybe in your synopsis, you need to write one paragraph of the scope of the story of all the point that I have written on this. What is the basically? So it provides a idea, a direction, a guide to the researcher how he or she is going to study and which dimension she or he wants to study, all these points that particularly on the context of your that we call as a scope of the study that we are talking about. And another point that I hope you all know that we called as a relevance of the study. What is this importance of the study? That you know, they just read this. That means you as a researcher, whenever you are writing, so basically on this context, what is this importance on this contest whenever you are going for? So maybe you need to write implications, policy implication, or usefulness of the study that you want to on this particular contest, how it is going to helpful for the policy makers, how it is going to make this all these government officials and NGO academicians, and the important dimensions you needs to provide, that what is your academic contributions to the literature if you are doing on this study. So you all this point that how the study is going to help particularly community that you want to study. So that is the important dimensions that you need to write, that we call as a relevance of the proposed study that you are planning. Okay, and then you know, I if you go for, so you just write down in the tentative chapter in your synopsis. So generally 6 to 7 chapter, most of the cases you find with respective. So you write, so the tentative chapter as follows. You write one chapter as a introductions, you write another chapter as a review of literature, you write another chapter as your methodology, you write another chapter as particularly with respective to secondary data. Using secondary data, you can write one chapter, two chapter. Then your field-based data that we call as a your findings from the field, that the primary data, and the within this that you write your discussion, all these things. And then the last chapter, first chapter and last chapter is common everywhere, that we call as a summary, conclusions, and recommendations. So these are you as a researcher, you needs to write all this point on this part. Okay, so this is something, and the last part, if you go for just you just look at it, then I will stop. So we'll take more questions on that. So you know, reference and bibliography. Most of the researcher miss on this point. Believe me, if you go for, you find that most of researcher, they have only given this reference or bibliography in the synopsis, But inside the test, whenever in the introduction, in this review of literature, no citation is there. That means you are doing a wrong thing. So always you need to keep in mind whatever reference you are giving in your proposal, in your synopsis. So you needs to be very, very clear. That should be inside your test. That you needs to keep in mind. Okay, I hope so. You know this. I will take only one word, then I will stop. That most of the cases that we as a researcher, what do you mean by? So if you go for what do you mean by reference and bibliography? Remember one thing, reference is exactly you are cited, you are quoted, you have paraphrased. But when you go for bibliography, you read, you develop your clarity, you develop your understanding, but you have not cited, you have not quoted, you have not paraphrased. But your knowledge, understanding, reading Minaketan Behera books, so you get a understanding on that. So in that context, so that comes under bibliography. Bibliography is universal set and reference is subset of bibliography. Okay, so this is you as a researcher. So remember one thing. So I all this point, whenever you are writing a synopsis, so you need to write all the point that I have written on this case. So thank you for this opportunity. My intention is that to all the young researcher, if you have any concerns, so please write to me. I will try my best to answer all the doubts that we have. I will tell to this researcher, the team, those who are coordinating these things. So they will share my email ID. So you as a researcher, so please, at least, because most of the missing part is that we don't have a clarity on this aspect. So I hope with my little knowledge, I have shared in front of you. So now the floor is open. Any questions you can ask. Whatever knowledge I have, I will try my best to answer. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prof. That is a well-detailed session and well-timed. So we have approximately 15 minutes with a maximum of an extra 15 minutes if the questions are so enticing and needs to be attended to today. So Prof is a busy person. He would definitely have to attend to other matters, but we are willing to add an additional 15 minutes in addition to today's schedule. So yes, let's keep it started. So this is what we do. Questions are going to be coming from YouTube and then also from the Zoom platform. I've already received some questions via WhatsApp from participants via YouTube. So what you do is you text your name and then your question. Possibly you can add where you are joining us from. So I'm going to start with the first question. But before I do that, um, let me call on the participants on Zoom who have raised up their hands. We'll take one person and then we'll take some questions from these YouTube participants. So on the list we have we have Rashid, we have Comfort, and we have Ibrahim, with Rashid being the first. Rashid, please you can unmute and ask your question. So your name, and then where you're joining from, and then your question. Thank you.
Okay, so I am just looking at this. If you are, yes, any questions you can unmute. Otherwise, I am just looking at this, whatever questions in the chat box. So I will just answer. If you go for theoretical framework, conceptual framework, empirical normally makes chapter 2 of the synopsis of our researcher. Yes, remember one thing, that is your choice of your supervisor. If you are writing a thesis, on detail. So you make as a chapter on this conceptual and theoretical and empirical framework. In that cases, maybe chapter 2 or chapter 3. But whenever you are writing a synopsis, so I always written, because the page is only for maybe you imagine maybe 20 pages, and you need to summarize all this in 3,000 words. So on that context, your choice, you can write in the introduction or make in subheading anywhere in that. But thesis, you are right. Yes. Any other questions? I'm just looking at the chat box. I'm going one by one. Then what should be happen if the all
Hello,
hypotheses are
good
rejected?
afternoon.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Comfort. I'm from KIU Western Campus in Uganda.
Yes. Yes.
I have two questions to ask. The
Yes.
first question is, if I have an interest in a topic and it's not a problem, can I go ahead and research it? Maybe I just like something and I'm curious, I want to know it. Must I have a gap before I go into a research? That's the first question. The
Yes.
second question is, what is the difference between a protocol and a proposal?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
So yes. So if you go for, remember one thing, I always say most of this researcher, so the first important, whenever you as a PhD student or you want to do a research, so the first important point that you needs to keep in mind, that always you needs to be, that should be a research gap. If there is not research gap on this contest, then my understanding is that in the social science, if you doing any research, maybe suppose if this research is very new, then you can do it. Suppose many times literature is not there on the topic, you find that is very new area, like you imagine at the time of COVID. Okay, so now there is no research gap, no literature, much literature. So on that context, it is very, very essential that I always say, you as a researcher, you needs to go to the literature, and from the literature, so you needs to identify the research gap. That means how your study is going to contribute on this contest that we are talking about, on this aspect of that we called as a, if you go for the contest of your research that you are planning to do. Okay, so this is, but if you find that on this contest, there is no literature on this contest, that you are working on this contest, and this is very new area, and that is not there. So on that contest, so you will find that you maybe you discuss with your supervisor. If he or she permit, then you can go ahead for this research work. I hope in the social science, always you needs to go for your with research gap. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So Prof, we do have a question from Zongwe. The name is Zongwe Kabonge, and from YouTube. So his question is, he has three questions. He says, what can be the minimum or maximum number of research questions and specific objectives in a question in a research? That is the first question. The second question is it possible to use hypothesis when I am conducting my research with a qualitative approach? And then the third question is, how can someone identify a research gap? Is it from specific objectives or the main objective?
Okay, I forget one questions that this previous researcher asked, that we call as a research proposal is a outline. If you go for particularly on this aspect that you needs for your confirmations, that your PhD, your seminar, your MPhil degree. But if you go for your research protocol, basically it is a step by step guide that describe how your research will be conducted in actually practice. Okay, so that basically you needs to understand that we technically that we call as a research protocol on this contest. And regarding this research questions that you are talking about, remember one thing, I always encourage student, you take 2 research questions, 3 research questions, which is at least you can collect the informations from the field or the data within the time period that you are. So you can at least 2 research questions, you can do that. 3, you can do it. People are doing 2, 3, 4, that is your choice. You discuss with your supervisor. Okay, what is the second part question?
So the second question was, is it possible to use hypothesis when I am conducting a research with a qualitative approach?
Yes, excellent questions. Yes, please, I always say, please don't write a hypothesis if you are doing a qualitative study. Because if, remember one thing, because if your data nature is test, image, perception, okay, so in that context, I always encourage that please don't write hypothesis in your study or your proposal. But many people think that, so always, if your supervisor and is commanding and you want to do some quantitative data yourself in quantitative qualitative researcher dimension that you are working, then you can decide. I say please don't write any hypothesis if you are doing a qualitative research. But if you are doing a quantitative research, that also, that if your supervisor is telling that please write this hypothesis, then you write. No need to write. But I always encourage as a economist, as a management, so you need to keep in mind on that. Yes. Yes. Other questions, please.
Okay, Prof.
Yeah, hello.
So we take
Yeah,
from the
good morning.
Zoom platform. Yes,
Hello.
please continue.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Senu from Ghana.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to find out with the research questions, right?
Yeah.
Do you drive them from your objectives?
Yeah.
Or and also how many research questions can you ask for each objective? And also with your theories. How many theories can you use in research? Can you use more than 2 theories about your research?
Yeah, excellent questions. I always say, all my young researcher, please, all my friends, always if you are doing a quantitative study or any qualitative study, if some theory, existing theory are there, I always encourage maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 on different aspect. So you can use it for your strengthening of your research work. But I always say, if you are okay with one theory, that is more than sufficient. That is not also. But if you are thinking that, okay, maybe 1, 2, these combined together will be very useful for me, that is very interesting. You can do that. So always you decide. I will say that 1, 2, 3, many things that you can combine with respective to your objective that you want to study. Then your research questions, remember one thing, I already explained the same thing, that you as a researcher, you take 2 objective, 3 objective. Huh?
We don't have, is it 400 and what?
Okay, what is the next question, please?
Okay.
Hello.
Sorry, I think that was a glitch. That was a interaction. Okay, so we'll meet everybody back again, and then you can send your questions directly on the chat room. Okay. So, Prof, this the next question is from an audience from sorry, a participant from WhatsApp. Sorry, from YouTube. So the name is Pearl Dogby, and she's joining us from Ghana, and she's saying, how can I ensure my research question is adequately focused and manageable for the scope of a thesis, and what are common pitfalls to avoid?
Okay, good. Okay, you as a researcher, remember one thing, you are going to be master of your thesis or master of your work. So whenever you are going to review of literature, whenever you are going different articles, books, reports, journals on your area, so you will able to identify your research gap. So on that research gap, so you needs to, you as a researcher, so you maybe what is this important questions or dimensions that I want to explore my PhD work, and that will contribute to the society, that will give me an opportunity for my future employment. Suppose I am working. Those researchers working on climate change in the contemporary times, those researchers working on AI and automation in the labor market. So they have a plenty of opportunity. This is very contemporary issue, very relevant, and that will give you a employment opportunity in the near future. So you as a researcher, you need to decide on that aspect, that you can think on how you will proceed on this case.
Yeah. Yes, Prof. Thank you. So we have one question from the chat room here on Zoom. I'm going to just read it out. So the name is okay. So my name is Saroba from India. And Saroba would like to ask how to test variable and what is the scale of testing variable?
Yes, that is if you go for, particularly if you go for that, you know, there is a concept that we call as a, in economics, that we call as a testing of hypothesis. Maybe in future, I have taken in India on each Sunday that the lecture that I am taking. So with the help of your statistical analysis, so you will able to, particularly on the contest that you are talking about, testing of anything. Suppose you want to test that is there any impact of your AI, artificial intelligence, on the particularly student thinking of those who are young researcher. So in that context, you as a researcher, so there are minimum 2 variables should be there. You want to collect the data on that, use of time in AI, and their critical thinking, you need to measure. And then with appropriate statistical tool, so you can test that variable, whether that is true or not. Okay, that is the one way that particularly quantitative researcher we use for our research work. Yes. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Oh, yes, Prof, you're audible. Sorry, I was muted. So we have one question. I would move on back to the members on the platform so you can unmute and ask your question. But please kindly ensure that you regulate the noise so that it doesn't distract the session. So the question is from Wiz Zaducha joining us from Malawi. And his question is with regards to the frameworks you mentioned, he wants to know if they can be interchangeably or maybe conceptual, if it's or is it strictly for quantitative?
No. Remember one thing, always I say, so two terms. One is conceptual framework. So that means you as a researcher, what are the variables? What are the independent variable? What are the dependent variable? So that is not only because whether you are a qualitative researcher or quantitative researcher, whether you are working on quantitative research or qualitative research, all the concept, suppose I'm giving the example, culture, indigenous knowledge, that in the contemporary times play a significant role. Your AI, your AGI, all this, your automations, the key term that you give a understanding for your research work. So that is the conceptual framework. So if you as a researcher, you are using for your research, understanding your research problem, that we call as a conceptual clarity, conceptual understanding related to your research. And whether it is qualitative, both. Quantitative, that means when you say theoretical framework, so theory that is already exists in the literature, established theory that you want to use in your research work, both for qualitative research and quantitative research. Both. Yes.
Okay, Prof. Thank you. So we're going to have one question from those in the Zoom platform. I'm going to unmute and then I'll give you the permission to mute and speak, and then you ask your question. So let me see. Okay. Zeblem Sharif, you can unmute and speak. So your name, where you're joining from, and then your question. Very good. Thank you.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, this is Sharif calling from the University for Development Studies, Ghana. My first question is, the first question is, for a master's thesis, can I use text-based research to do it, or I have to go for the primary group and the secondary group? So that happens. The second question is, for the research proposal, can I have the research objectives without the research questions in the proposal aspect?
Yeah. So yes. So remember one thing, as you are a MA students, post-graduation student for your PhD thesis, I always encourage you can generally, in our time, we start with objective. There is no role of research questions. So I always say, if your supervisor is telling that you need to write research question, then you write. Otherwise, it is not necessary, as you are a MA students, so you can start with your objective. That's fine. That is not the issue. You can go on this point. What is your first question? Okay, maybe I forget this first question.
If you can unmute and speak again.
Yeah. No. Let me, the other people, those who are there, they can ask, no problem.
Hello, Prof.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, Prof. It seems you didn't answer my earlier question. I asked whether you can use 2 or more research questions for an objective.
2 and more is to what's you are talking about, yes. Yes, many people say that from one objective you can write 2 research questions. People are doing that, but I always encourage, as a young researcher, please, many people are doing that. Always, if you go for your research question is a general and your research objective is specific, so always I encourage that you as a researcher, so if your supervisor is telling that one objective you can write 2 questions, so but I always support that you write other way, that 1 questions you formulate 2 objective. You can, if your supervisor is agree on that, but I always discourage that, please don't write that. Many people also, they are writing 1 objective with two research questions. Other way they are writing. Yes, you can just decide. But my suggestion is that try you write general research questions and then from that specific. Am I clear, Sonu?
Yes, please. You are clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You just discuss with your supervisor, but generally because your research questions provide the directions of the study, and the objective is very specific that you want to measure. So in that context, if you are following that pattern, so it is always that you should not do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Prof, because of the time, we would want to round up briefly, but Prof, do you mind giving us some extra 5 minutes?
100%. No problem. I am always with you people. It
Okay.
is my intention that at least if you have any concern, I am happy that 300 people are yet joining on this platform. So you
Yes.
can do it. I am doing this lecture in India in each Sunday for the benefit of the students. So you can take the benefit of that. So, but the time constant is there. Generally, we difficult. But you do it. I am ready to take different lecture on different times. Only thing is that you needs to coordinate.
Okay. Yes, Prof. Thank you so much. So it's been great having you on to this call. Would like to round up for today, but and please kindly note that we would send you updates on how you can join consecutive research training sessions by Professor Minakitan. That happens on Sundays. And then also take advantage of all the opportunities. I'm really sorry we could not take all the questions at the moment. And also we had some complaints via email about the Zoom limit. But nevertheless, we made provisions and we are glad that over 500 people joined on YouTube in the live stream and they actively partook in it. So in case you join the next day and you happen to see the platform being full, please switch to YouTube and then get it on there. Okay.
So one thing, just 1 minute. I am writing my email ID in the chat box. So you just share with those who are interested. You can write any problems that you have related to questions that we have discussed. So you can, I will try my best to answer it. So yes. I have written, Behera, you just look at it, those who are here, behera.minaketan@gmail.com. You just, yes. So you do that. So I am always there to help you. Any clarification, anything, whatever that I have, I will share with you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So one more announcement. The assessment form has been shared on Zoom and then also on YouTube. We will reshare that on the WhatsApp platform as well, but we can't do it on email because we've reached our email limits for today. So kindly fill it. It's timed. You don't have too much time to spare on that. So we would use that to process the certificates. So ensure that you fill it with the exact name you used to register. So we have the same name complemented. And then also there are some questions tailored to what the session today was about. So we would also use that as an assessment to see about, yes, please. Thank you so much. And we are glad you just joined. We'll see you tomorrow, but please note tomorrow's time is going to be different. Tomorrow is going to be at 4 p.m. GMT. Updates will be sent to the WhatsApp platform. We might not be able to send consistent emails due to the constraints via email. So what we can do is ensure you're on the platform on WhatsApp. If you're not, you can find the number on YouTube on our channel, send a message and we'll add you to the WhatsApp platform. And then also please take note of the time differences. We had 28, we had people joining from across 27 countries. and we are glad to have over 1,500 registered. And today we had over 800 participants in the event. Thank you for joining, and we truly appreciate your interest. So kindly take note of the assessment form and please get it filled. Thank you, and we look forward to another impactful session tomorrow. And thank you so much, Prof. Before we end the session, what do we say to Prof on the YouTube chat room, on the WhatsApp chat room? Sorry, I mean on the Zoom chat room. What do we say to Prof as he's watching us? You can give him some claps with your emojis and so on. Send some messages, show some love. We want to say thank you so much, Prof. It's been so impactful, highly, highly impactful, and highly detailed. A lot of positive comments, and we look forward to joining the Sunday sessions, the series. Thank
Okay,
you.
do one thing. If
Yes.
you allow me, I am ready to take class, but you needs to coordinate. So only
Yes.
for the knowledge, maybe certificate is some extent very difficult. So
Yes.
you do one thing that maybe if maybe in 1 month you can arrange a lecture for the students. I am ready to do that on different topic like the sampling, questionnaire design, field survey, any topic of your interest. So make plan. So I am ready to contribute on that for the benefit of this young researcher. I am always with this, and thank you that at least you have taken this initiative, and you are telling that close to 20 country people have joined for this program. So it is all credit goes to you that you have arranged it in great success. So all the students, you imagine 300 students in this join. So maybe that is the positive point. You make plan regularly. I am with you. So thank you. So with your permissions, I need to leave. So see you. Any help, any research work, help, anything that you want. I have shared my email ID. Otherwise, you write to me, or any issue, any concerns. I am always with you. Any help, please let me know. So whatever way, I will try my best to help you people. So namaste. So good night. So see you very soon in another program.
Yes, Prof. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. So good night, good afternoon, good morning, depending on your location. And see you tomorrow for the next session. And
Yeah,
please check
thank you.
out the page and kindly fill the assessment form. It's a timed form. We'll close it very soon. Thank you. Goodbye. And thank you for
Bye.
joining.
Bye. Thank you. Namaste.